And so I got into this residency, and it was for 50-minute films. It was when the AFC were doing this 50-minute film thing. So I thought I could draw on my experience of being in the post-punk scene in St Kilda. I came over from Adelaide to this amazing scene that I had no idea what I was getting myself in for.
Totally unprepared for it, yeah.
And, you know, I was...
how old were you at the time?
Amazed. Oh, probably about 12. No, a bit older than that.
Old enough for it to be like...
Yeah, I was about 20. Yeah. And so it was like, you know, I was absolutely swept away by it. And I was thinking about writing something which was for 50 minutes, which was, you know, my recollection of experiences back then. Millicent isn't based on me, but rather a collection of people that were around in the scene. And so I wrote this thing for the 50-minute thing about this woman who was in a band at that time. And soon after I wrote it, the 50-minute thing was shelved, so it didn't go any further, and it was a very awkward length. So cut to 2009, when I was starting a PhD, and I wanted to, I thought, strangely, that if I got a scholarship I'd be able to make a feature film, you know. So that was like all my eggs in one basket. So
because the fiscal remuneration of the scholarship, or because of the critical groundwork and the...
No, it was the money.
Yeah, of course.
And, you know, I got it. Yeah. And so I was, you know, really interested, as I am, in ghosts and working on that. And then I was thinking of a story to make, and I thought of Millicent, because her name was Millicent back in the 50-minute thing, and I thought, I wonder what's happened to her. You know, if I put her 25 years later, what would her life be like? And I was really interested in cryptic incorporation. I was looking at that, where grieving is left incomplete. So I thought that would be a good place to start with the story.
And what's fascinating also about the film is that you kind of don't really know what triggers this recollection, this delayed grief response, except that it seems to be something in the fabric of the environment around her that just doesn't seem to be any one thing. It just seems to be present. Perhaps has something to do with the space. What's really interesting is that a really great sequence, that very long sequence where she's sort of walking along the esplanade, and you have all the figures sort of mobilizing behind her, almost like, you know, the unit is... They're off to go to a party or something, bit, you know, with boots and everything. But there's a moment almost where it seems like they walk past the old Mandalay buildings. Do you know the Mandalay? And that's which is of course like an uncanny. I mean, it's an uncanny resonance to anyone who knows the story of the Mandalay buildings, and you know, it almost feels like that's exactly the community that would have lived in those buildings at the time, and that sense of I guess a kind of frisson between kind of like the actuality of the stories behind St Kilda, of which you obviously know quite a lot, and the kind of genre element of the film, which only really, it never quite turns into a horror film, quote unquote, but there's that, I guess, that tradition of like 18th century Gothic literature, particularly around women and the experience of women, women's yearnings and dread related to the body and related to the idea of buried or suppressed past. I thought a bit of Jack Clayton's film The Innocents.
Well, I was looking at The Innocents, you know, that's one of my favourite films that I draw on all the time, and you know, I was really trying to sort of conjure that kind of feeling of is it in her head, or is it you know, tangible, or what it is, you know, and you know, the black and white as well, you know.
Yeah.
So exactly.
And what was the process of kind of like, you know, once you had that skeleton of the script together, in terms of really fleshing it out and developing it with the performers, particularly the lead, like how much of that process was done in, I guess, in the preparation stages after you had like a semi-final draft script, and how much of that was kind of workshopped in rehearsal or on set?
Okay. So I had the script. I could only get Annie for like 10 days, so we had no rehearsal.
Yeah.
So she just walked onto set and did that.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, she's fabulous. Yeah, she embodied the character. We went up to Sydney, and I'd seen her like on little bits of TV, like guest appearances where she would just be so emotional, all that kind of stuff. And I thought she had the look. I knew she could act, but I just wanted to see how she felt about the material. So we went up to Sydney and we had like there was no point auditioning. I knew she could act. So we had about a 3-hour kind of coffee date, and she told me all this stuff that was very similar to the character, and
about her personal experience.
Yeah. And I knew, as soon as she started talking, I knew I could just cast her then. But as we got closer to the material, she kind of embodied the character. So it was really great. So she came down, walked on set, and all I needed to do was tinker around the edges, really. With Clara, it was her first a kind of feature film, and she was so enthusiastic, but in a completely different way, which kind of worked between the A and B stories of Annie in the present and Robin in the past. So it was a really, really great mix, and we got onto set, and as I was saying to you earlier, it was a very happy set. We just did it, which is, I haven't had that experience again. So.
Was it obviously because there was maybe a weird sense of like you guys were a band almost?
Yes.
A small group of filmmakers? Yeah.
It was
and was
like
that kind of energy?
Yeah, we had there was probably about 6 of us.
Yeah.
And it was so funny to watch it because I hadn't seen it for I don't know how long, but I kept seeing the AD cross the frame and the production assistant in the background all the time, just filling out all the spaces, and I just thought how great that was. It was a real sense of camaraderie with that. It was really quick. I wanted, I love long takes. I think, I mean, they're not for everybody, but for me, you can just get a real sense of character in them. So,
definitely.
It wasn't huge labouring all the time. I could just set the camera, she could do it, and then we could move on if it was right, so we didn't have to keep going back and back and back all the time and, get little bits of hands and all that kind of stuff. So we powered through it, once she was
part of it was that, I guess, kind of like very minimal, very tight kind of sense of allowing the moment to breathe and allowing the action to unfold within a take as opposed to cutting it up. As you would see, say, in even a contemporary Australian horror overall, would you say that that's much more your thing rather than going in the direction
exactly,
of it?
A slow burn, just sort of let it creep up.
Yeah.
I think I wrote it at in my PhD, and it seems very pretentious now, but I was saying, there's 2 sorts of ways to film. There's like the aerobics or yoga.
Yeah, right.
And I prefer the yoga. You still get to the same position, but it's sort of much slower, and you can kind of feel it instead of rushing and looking around and doing all these different moves. So that's what I enjoy watching, and I just think things just unfolding slowly give a sense of much more, connection with the audience too. You kind of jump into the film so just sort of sitting back and watching all these takes. And
totally.
I hope that happens. That's what I try to do.
I think you definitely can feel it in your work. Where did the play with the focus come from? Because I found that particularly effective.
The ghosts, It was just something that Laszlo was sort of mucking around with at the start, and then we were going, no, let's keep it,
Totally,
so it became a feature of the film. Because it was really interesting seeing how the A and the B story worked again in retrospect. Robin was coming out of the ether to rescue Johnny, basically, because he was caught up in this grieving that was left incomplete, so he couldn't move anywhere. And it was so lovely to see them, go back at the end of the film. They were together, because at the start of the film she walked up without him, and then she was drawing him back into their world again. And, I think without that out of focus stuff, it wouldn't have worked. With the music, the beautiful Dave Graney and Claire Moore music underneath,
which sounds actually weirdly a little bit like Tindersticks at times. Do you know the band Tindersticks?
No.
That do a lot of the scores for Claire Denis movies.
Oh, okay.
Particularly Trouble Every Day, which is
right.
that great movie she made about vampires and about cannibalism. That sense of profound melancholy and loss that comes through the music that offsets the kind of overt horror elements of the film really feels to me like it puts it in a tradition that's in some ways closer to 18th century ghost literature as much as to sort of contemporary horror cinema.
Well, that's the world that I like to draw from.
Yeah.
You know, that's where, you know, I love that stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Love it.
And how much of this, because you know your filmmaking, this is your debut feature.
That was my first one.
Yeah.
Yep.
How much of your preparation for the film I guess involves cinephilia or love of literature? Just as you were forming as a filmmaker, how important were those sort of things to you?
Oh, very, very, very important.
Donna's also a lecturer in cinema, by the way, up at Deakin. Yeah.
Someone here in the audience, Michael, always talks about postmodernism being the supermarket of free ideas.
Yeah, totally.
So I always try and, you know, see as many old horror films as I can and just kind of like, you know...
Do you have particular favourites?
Take from there. Well, The Innocents, I love. I love The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, 1945. I love that film so much. I always go back to, and this is really strange because people go, what? The Woman in Black. I just think it's so great.
The new version or the old version?
All of them.
Yeah.
And when I was in London, I saw the stage play this time last year probably, and even that thrilled me. You know, I just love the idea of this woman who is so consumed by rage. I'd love to see an origin story of her, you know, and that probably no one would do it. But, you know, she's got everything, all the gothic tendencies that you were talking about. You know, she's really got that. So they're my three that I always go back to all the time. And it doesn't matter, the TV version of that is fabulous. Harry Potter version is great. No, I shouldn't say that. Daniel Radcliffe, it's a fantastic film.
That is pretty good, that film, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And what about... because in the liner notes I wrote about Jacques Tourneur and the Val Lewton horror films of the 40s, where it's like that idea of the budget restrictions forcing an economy of means that really pushes you to be kind of inventive and very, very contained with horror stories. And that seems to work really well in the horror genre, not so much if you're trying to make a sci-fi film. But
yeah, well, again, I'm a real fan of all the Jacques Tourneur and all the Val Lewton films, actually, and I grew up them. I saw Deadly Ernest in Adelaide used to play them on a Friday night.
Yeah, right.
And, you know, so that's where I learned. And, you know, I don't know if Bill Collins did, but I used to watch them on telly, and finally getting, you know, the box set of them all was just fabulous. And, you know, I love the fact that you said that. That was a real thrill to me because, you know, to me those films are so minimal, so perfect. You don't have to do, like, the reason Millicent is a lecturer in a university is because I was doing my PhD there, and I knew I wouldn't have to pay for location.
So it wasn't self-reflexive, it's not you...
No.
Because I was sitting there going, this is really about you, and thinking that she was a stand-in. But, so it was purely functional then?
Functional.
Yeah.
Totally functional. I was looking around for other locations, and then it was just like, oh, they're all here. I might as well just make her a lecturer. And then I had for, you know, a minute thinking, oh, people will think it's about me, but it's not about me. I didn't go through that. Mm-hmm. You know, I've got friends that have come to see the film when it, you know, 10 years ago when it had its run, and it kind of looked at me ashen-faced at the end, you know, thinking, have you mind my story? But, you know, it was a whole mishmash of things. So yeah, there was nothing really. That wasn't my office. I wasn't even working as a lecturer then. I was just tutoring a bit. Yeah,
right. And what was the reaction at the time toward the film, and how has its life sort of shifted over the intervening 10 years? Since almost 10 years when it was.
It did. Look, I thought I hit it out of the ballpark with it. I wasn't expecting anything really. Well, I was, but I didn't think that it would happen. It won about 7 awards, like a couple of jury prizes, you know, best feature, best female director, that kind of stuff, best editing, which was a surprise because I did the editing only because I couldn't afford to pay anyone
an editor
to do it.
And
then it got picked up for Titan View, got it. It had some, you know, screenings in Sydney and Melbourne. It got overseas distro.
As theatrical or video on demand?
Streaming,
Streaming,
yeah. And that's gone really well. It's just gives me a little bit of money every year, which is amazing.
That's good.
and there's been a little bit of more interest in it lately. And Bounty Media have just taken it. Now it's on Amazon. It was on it, a few places you could see it, but now it's on Prime Video. They've taken it. That's all over the world now, and I think just because of Lost Gully Road, people are wanting to have a look. So which is great. Thank you for putting it on today. It's
you're
really
welcome,
great to see it.
No, I wanted to see it on a screen in a theatre with an audience for sure.
Yeah, no, thank you.
And how do you feel? Your learnings on this film applied when you came to do Lost Gully Road, which is a significantly more. It's also a very contained film, but it's also significantly more ambitious in some respects as well.
Yeah. Well, I think I probably thought it was going to be easier than what it was because of such the great experience we had with that. But I still was aware of the budget, so I wrote the film specifically for that budget, and I wanted to keep it minimal. I mean, other than I like that kind of thing anyway, I like that style of film. I just knew that I would get into trouble if I tried to go very big. So, I think this works for the amount of money we spent on it. If you ask me what I could have done better, well, I don't know, because it was a very small story.
Yeah.
And so with Lost Gully Road, that's what I applied. So it needed to be minimal. It needed to be contained in one location, really, because of what we wanted to do. Because the worst thing about it, if you're making a small film, I think you have to keep within those parameters. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
It becomes tricky, yeah.
So that's a thing. But I wanted to go another step up with Lost Gully Road. I thought that I needed to become more ambitious, and it was a more ambitious film, even though it was probably less characters. There was only 4, and the main character again was in every scene. And, I like that. I like that. They're the kind of films that I like to go and see. The next one I'm working on is the same thing, but it's going way up. Like I need a lot of money.
More money.
with that one. Yeah.
And I guess maybe as just my interest, which is low budget film methodology, how much of this kind of filmmaking would be sustainable in the mid to long term for you if you wanted to keep making a film at the budget level of and within the means of, say, this film or even Lost Gully Road? Is that something that you can see filmmakers doing on a fairly consistent basis without having to necessarily scale up and aim for the million plus Screen Australia funded film?
If you had money,
Yeah.
if you had somehow to get it, then yes.
Yeah.
I think the no restraints of funding your own film and not having to answer to anyone is so liberating. It's fantastic. You can do whatever you like. But I mean, how do you sustain that?
Totally.
That's the thing. How do you get that money? There's only so many times you can go to your friends for crowdfunding. There's only so many times you can ask for favours. With mine, I've always paid everyone that's working on it, apart from one person I know in the background. But there's, I think that's really important too. I think it's fine for maybe 1 or 2 days, but when you're doing like 10 days
Totally.
or 2 weeks or something, people have to, earn, pay their rent. So it's a really hard one. I mean, I've done Johnny Ghost, Lost Gully Road, and our doco, Cobby the Other Side of Cute. Both Lost Gully Road and Cobby, the university put in money for that, and Film Victoria put in some money for Lost Gully just at the totally
Post completion
total
funds or festival release or
it
release
was
funds?
marketing, low budget marketing. So it was only.
Did you go for the
tiny
innovation
bit.
in marketing funding?
It was a low budget features one.
Yeah.
That was there and now it's gone.
Yeah, it's now they're still running. It's called the Innovation in Marketing Fund.
Oh.
So, but it's not. It's with a different emphasis, but they're looking to for filmmakers who are interested in creating new and innovative distribution and marketing mechanisms toward distribution of films. So it's quite a particular. The way it's explained is quite particular, but yeah, I mean, I think that kind of level suits low budget films because you're forced to kind of create your own
Exactly.
your own culture around your films, your own discourse, your own levels of critical support, and your own routes of distribution. Sometimes because you don't have a sales agent, you have to act as your own sales agent.
Well, I didn't with Johnny Ghost, and that I just happened to run into someone at an overseas film festival who was a distributor. And that's how that got the distribution distro overseas.
Yeah.
Titan View, John L. Simpson, I'm not sure whether he does it anymore, but he came on board and just really put it streaming, and they were going to make DVDs, but then they did, so that was good. But with Lost Gully Road, Umbrella jumped on us, after it was finished, of course, and then I didn't have to do anything by that.
Which is great. It's everywhere. It's on my Optus box at home, actually. It's in the first 2 pages when you scroll through horror film.
Okay.
That's really, it is.
Well, that's good.
That's how I first saw it.
Wow, that's good. Yeah, they've been really great, actually. They've got it out there. And it's really...
And I hazard it's also, I think it's also on Canopy.
Yes, and Johnny Ghost is on Canopy too. So that's good. So that's, you can get it through libraries and things. But it's a totally different world with a distributor like that on board, because they can get you into film festivals and stuff. With this one, you have to I had to haggle myself, try and get any connection. And at that stage, I didn't have as many connections as I do now, 10 years later. So it was amazing that it actually got looked at, because it's so hard.
Did you get a chance to travel with this film?
I did.
Yeah.
So we went to Minneapolis there, Texas, Berlin. I think that was the 3 places that we... But it went to London, Portugal, quite a few. I think it played 11 festivals, and then I'd stopped putting it in because I had distribution and I didn't want to spend any more money.
Yeah, totally.
Because I already spent it. But, it probably may have got in... Well, because it got into 11, it probably would have got into more if I wanted to. But,
totally.
I just thought, you've got to draw a line somewhere.
And do you find seeing the film with a horror genre audience is different to watching it with, say, just an audience that would see it, I guess, as an art film?
Yes.
Was that differentiation clear when you were screening in those early screenings?
Like, I remember playing it down in Stranger with My Face, and someone came up to me and just straight here, just came up to me and goes, "It's not horror," and then walked off.
Yeah, wow.
And didn't even give me a right of reply.
They had a very clear idea of what they thought a horror film was.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And I know it's not horror, as there's no decapitations and lots of blood.
That's what I was waiting for. I thought maybe at the end someone's going to cut her head off.
Well, there's the moment where she's reclining back in the
bath.
in the massage, the massage parlor, and you do that shot of her neck exposed. It's almost kind of like, so there's moments where you are kind of playing with the convention of this could turn into a kind of horror film, like a slasher film, but it doesn't. And were you conscious of like seeding those little elements through the film?
I was trying to a little bit.
Yeah,
just sort of trying to play with one's sort of expectations, I guess.
She was very muscular. You could see she was a very muscular woman.
I can't believe how much exercise I made her do.
Mm-hmm.
It was so much.
That scene in the gym is like that's furious. Yes. I can't believe that she didn't break the mirror.
That was the first scene we shot, I think.
Yeah, oh, wow.
And that was in the Monash gym. But yeah, I just can't believe how much exercise. But she was up for it. She was like a champion swimmer, and she jogged and all this kind of stuff that I never knew about her. That's what I was saying about, she was so, had so many different things with the characters. I've forgotten what we the horror. Yeah. And I guess with Lost Gully too, I've tried to play with that, push that a little bit further, like expectations.
That definitely has much more of that armature than this film does in some respects. To a different effect as well. Yeah. I think, yeah.
I mean, I think this is totally an art. I think that's where it falls. But, it's funny because it's a ghost film. Ghost films are in the horror genre, but to get programmed into a horror festival, it's kind of sitting outside those boundaries. So it was really hard to get. The underground film festivals were the place where it found its life. Which is,
and you got Best Director at Muff, I think? Yeah?
Yes,
yeah.
I did.
That's right.
No, I didn't. I got jury prize.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, best jury prize. Best director, no, someone else got that. Yeah, that was a long
And what was it
time
like
ago.
screening at Muff back in, would have been 2011, 2012?
Back then, I don't think it was as controversial as it
Yeah.
is now. And Richard put us on at 11 p.m, which was kind of like, what? But it was packed, and it was a really good
They love their late
audience.
night screenings there, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a really soft audience. Everyone knew me, and yeah, it was the first time I'd screened in Melbourne. And then we came back probably about 6 months or maybe about 10 months later after we'd done overseas and got all those awards and had 2 sellouts at Acme
Yeah, cool.
with Titan View, and that was really great too.
What's your interest in horror movies in that horror genre?
Well, I always put it down to watching Casper the Friendly Ghost
Yeah.
on TV. I was an only child and always wanted an imaginary friend, and he fit the bill. And then I've already mentioned Deadly Earnest, so I used to watch them
We used to watch that.
Friday nights, and that got me hooked, I think.
So you see ghosts essentially as benign, or at least or maybe perhaps misunderstood.
Yeah, both of those. I think
Yeah.
they're memories, I mean,
Yeah.
I did a whole PhD at this, and I think it's sort of memories coming back, and as a filmmaker or as a writer or, anybody that you can, use ghosts, you can cover so much stuff, you can have so much fun with them because they can be internal, they can be external, they can be nasty, they can be nice, all that kind of stuff. And I just think it's a fantastic medium to work in. I love
Totally.
working in horror. I think you can say so much more than any other any other genre.
And it's suited to cinema in a very particular way, I guess, because images themselves are like traces or ghosts of
Yeah, exactly.
other things,
Like the medium.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think that really, it's a wonderful thing to play with in film, for sure.
And I can never get the screen black enough because, I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
If the corners of the screen are black, then you're sitting out there in the dark and you can start to imagine shapes, in the screen. And, I always want it darker than what it possibly can. And with Lost Gully Road, I kept saying dark, dark, dark.
Yeah.
And we'd go into a cinema and then you couldn't see anything. And so every time I look at something now, I think it's still too light, even tonight.
Yeah.
Oh, come on. And that's not the theatre's fault.
It is partly the projector,
But
for sure. Yeah.
just anywhere, I just think, why didn't we grade it down darker? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we can the film itself can start playing tricks with the audience.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of blackness, of genuine blackness in films. Where, do you know the French filmmaker Philippe Grandrieux?
Yes, I've seen one film.
He uses black better than just about anyone that I can think of, because of that sense of it's not just darkness; it's genuine black, and that sense of images rising and falling back out of that space. He also does the out of focus thing as well.
Okay.
In his work. Yeah, I'm with you. I think it would be great to see the next film just be half in darkness, and see what that does. Because I think the sound as well is something that's obviously I think maybe horror filmmakers or filmmakers working in the horror genre are particularly attuned to the magic of film sound in a way different to people who are making a conventional narrative drama talking heads film, and I think there's moments in the film, particularly in the first half, where there's an almost kind of evacuated sense of silence in the background, where there feels like there weren't a lot of Foley tracks that you had working with it. It was just kind of the dialogue elements, and then just kind of this low hum of background atmospherics. Was that budgetary, or was that a decision that you made?
It was
because you wanted that.
It was kind of both.
Yeah.
We only had a week in the sound studio.
Yeah,
and
right.
Didn't really capture a lot of other stuff. But I wanted it silent, really, as well.
Yeah.
Like a lot of those kind of moments where we're just trying to listen, because I think, especially with horror, if you're trying to elicit something from the audience or something from the viewer, that if there's no sound there, then
you lean forward.
Yeah,
actually, you start to really pay attention
and
to.
And it's a sense of dread. Think, something's coming here. So I was trying to do that too.
Yeah.
But, you know, a lot of the times we were in places when no one was around, and so there wasn't a lot of sound. There was, after she was in the swimming pool and she was walking through and she saw Robin for the first time properly, there was no wind, there was nothing, you know, and it was so strange. We were out in Clayton and there was just, you know, so if we'd have put stuff in, like built it up, I think it would have looked a bit, you know, it sounded a bit fake.
Yeah,
really. Yeah, so it's a mixture of both of those. Oh, it's so fun to talk about the film.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it
absolutely.
for ages.
Well, thank you for coming down. And
thank you for
no
having
worries.
me, and thank you everyone for
Thank you.
turning
Thank you.
up. It was really